All information in this program is known to be accurate at the time of recording. Any commentary by the host is for discussion purposes only. Anyone labeled a person of interest by the host or family has not been charged with a crime. All suspects charged with crimes related or unrelated to a case covered are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Opinions and views expressed by the host do not represent views of the families or sponsors of this program. In the U.S., there are over 600,000 missing persons cases reported each year. Many go unnoticed by the general public and are not covered by the media or investigated by law enforcement. Here is just one of these stories. From Grimm Media, I'm your host, Steve Stone, and this is the Grimm Truth Podcast. This is episode 22, the Sarah Burton case. Hello, friends. Welcome to the Grimm Truth Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Stone. This is episode 22, the Sarah Burton case. Before we get into it, I would like everybody to, if you haven't done so, subscribe to the Grimm Truth Podcast YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode of the podcast or any of the content regarding the missing. Leave us a like and a comment. Moving strictly to YouTube and this platform was just so we could get more involved with our listeners and our viewers, and we want you guys to interact and comment on these cases. So we want to hear your opinions, whether they're dissenting opinions or your opinions on what you think might have happened. We want you guys involved. We think that getting more people involved, sharing these stories, is going to help possibly get more, might turn the tide, more information on these cases, and could very well be the answer that these families need to bring their loved ones home. So again, subscribe, like, comment, share. Let's get this channel out to as many people as we can. That YouTube algorithm works best when people share, because then it gets the podcast out to those that might not know about what we do here at Grimm Media and the Grimm Truth Podcast. As well as, there's a lot of true crime aficionados that really get into these type of things. And believe it or not, there are a lot of people that do listen to true crime that are very helpful in missing persons cases, and they get into it. So share. We just want to be able to tell the stories of the families and show you visually how it affects them, as well as sharing photographs of the missing, and really trying to connect with them. And that's what we're trying to do here. So today's case is going to be that of Sarah Burton. She went missing from Joplin, Missouri on July the 16th, 2018. There's been a lot to this case, and it's the usual stuff that we've heard time and time again that I speak up about. It's those stigmas, though they were from the wrong side of the tracks, or they had a criminal history, or and people don't get it, that no matter where you come from, whatever was going on with your life, you're missing, and they deserve to be found. You're going to hear in this interview I did with Sarah's grandmother, Terri Burton, that they thought she was running from her troubles. They thought she was running from her some of the things that she was trying to handle with some criminal justice stuff, and just because a person is living a different life and struggling with that, they're still a person. She has children. She has a family, and she deserves to be looked for. Also, you want to keep an open mind while listening to this. This case, of course, has had its share of drama. Not everybody is going to agree with how a case should be handled. Not everybody is going to agree with how information is shared or not shared. And we have to keep in mind, too, that a lot of times in these cases where, you're trying to find somebody, there may or may not be foul play involved. Some things have to be, held close to the vest. I can tell you, having done this and by my history in law enforcement, there are things that things can't be told to the family to protect the integrity of the investigation. And that's paramount. There have been a lot of people that have worked on Sarah's case, and we have to keep in mind that a lot of those things can't be told because they have to stay under wraps. By that same token, we also need to understand that families hurt. And a lot of times they don't know how to express that hurt. They don't know how to go about doing things. I mean, there's no playbook for this, right? And I think that families sometimes just hurt so much, they don't know what to do. And they want to be able to do whatever they can to bring back their loved one. So, in listening to this, I'd like everybody just to keep an open mind. And as we dive into the missing person case of Sarah Burton, and as we talk to Terri, and in this interview, you're going to hear how she's been involved in Sarah's life since she was 5. She married Sarah's grandfather when she was 5 years old. So Terri's been a part of the family for quite a long time. And she has her opinions and she has her concerns. And, again, there's no playbook for this. There's just feelings and emotions, and that's one of the reasons why doing this podcast on YouTube, so that you guys can see what these families go through. So without further ado, here is my interview that I did with Terri Burton, Sarah Burton's grandmother. Take a listen. Burton, she is the grandmother of Sarah Burton, and we're talking about the disappearance of Sarah. Terri, go ahead and just tell me your memories of Sarah and what age you came to be involved with the family.
Well, I first met Sarah when she was about 4.5, almost 5. Whenever I started dating her grandfather, and we would, have family get-togethers and stuff. And she was the sweetest, the most innocent, sweet little 4 and 5-year-old you ever saw. She was a flower girl at my wedding, and she was extremely smart, and she was just precious. I just loved her,
Right.
And she was, as she aged and in school and stuff, she was in advanced classes for the gifted, and she was, like I said, she was smart and active. She was a cheerleader in high school. She was top of the mill, and so, I remember a lot of things about her that I have a hard time now because of emotions, putting into words. But like I thought of her the other night when I watched a little girl dancing to a real pretty song, and it just reminded me of Sarah, and emotions overcame me, and it's just her. It's been 3 years, more than 3 years since she went missing.
So let's talk about that. What was life like for her before she disappeared?
Well, I think as an adult, she had a pretty hard time when she was, I'm thinking she was 18 or 19. She had been a victim of a violent crime, and that affected her. Some other instabilities, in her life at home. Not cutting down her parents or anything. It's just things that happen in life. And she just, was kind of the innocent that she became pretty much a victim of life at that point. Her life, anyway. She did have 2 little boys. And as a single mom, And but she had her parents to try and help, and she got into mainly the wrong walk of life, if to put it as simply as possible. My son was also involved in that, and they were very close, but he got out of it. She was trying to get away from all of it so that she could raise her sons.
What would you consider your relationship to be with Sarah? How was your relationship personally with her?
Well, for a long time it was good until their grandfather passed away. And well, actually before that, because of her mother's choice, it wasn't anything that I could and her grandfather could ever figure out as to why. But I was removed from being able to see them, both she and her sister. And that made it difficult. And then when her grandpa passed away, she had been led to believe that I was some horrible monster. And my son kept trying to tell her, you got mom all wrong. If you ever needed anything or was in danger, get a hold of mom. She'll help you, And she came to realize that. I think I saw her about 5 days before she went missing, and I'm the actual last family member that saw her. She came through my line where I worked at Home Depot and was making a purchase, and her friend that was with her that day, she told me later, after she went missing, that Sarah was just almost in tears when she got to the car and she told her that my son was right, that she had been wrong all these years about me, that I had, and she was almost in tears. So she knew that I cared, because it showed. Anytime I saw her, which that wasn't the only time I'd seen her since she was an adult, but there were times when I'd seen her and I was always she was still my granddaughter.
Right.
So since 1995, when I married her grandpa. So that's how long it had been.
So quite a while.
Yeah, I'd been her grandma basically in name, since 1995.
So let's get into her home life a little bit. Who was she married?
No.
So who was the I guess the boyfriend at the time?
Brian Thorpe.
Brian Thorpe. And
Yeah.
Did they have any children together?
They had 2 children together.
Okay. And did they have custody of both of those children?
She did. Well, she had custody of one. The youngest one, Brian's parents were raising.
Okay.
So.
And what was the reason for that?
I'm not real sure. I've been told that he had some learning disabilities, and they were both educators in the school system over where they live in Kansas. And so they were best equipped basically to deal with his needs, his special needs. Yeah.
So, and we've talked off the record before, and for those that know me that do the podcast, no matter what a person is doing in their life, no matter the troubles they have, no matter the side of the tracks they are, they still don't deserve to go missing. They deserve to be found. Whoever they are, they matter. She was having some she was mixed up in a life that I'm sure she realized she was in over her head. Can you give me information on what that was and what kind of a toll that was taken on her?
Well, most of it, she had been in trouble for like fake IDs, dealing drugs, possession. I don't think she really partook of any alcohol or anything like that, but it was mainly just the drugs and the drug life. you know,
And did this
basically all of what that consists of.
right? And this did this escalate when she hooked up with the boyfriend?
Yes, because he was definitely involved in that type of life.
What was he doing?
He was dealing drugs.
Okay. Was he mixed up was he mixed up with a certain group of people, or was it just him? What was the dynamic there? Was she involved in it? Whether by
Well,
choice or by force that you know
what
of?
what I was told now, because I didn't have any firsthand knowledge as to who she was connected to, but reading some of the CaseNet files, etc., on and the people that she was running with, it was cartel and the local honky group. But I don't think she was a member. They're called honky honeys, and I don't believe that Sarah was a honky honey, but I do believe that she might have been dealing with the cartel, because that's what I was told he was dealing with.
Was this part of her life as before she went missing? I mean, if you know, what was this starting to weigh on her? Were there charges pending on her before she went missing? And
Yes,
did it seem like she was trying to get out from under?
yes. Well, she had been to court the day she went missing even, and from what I've been told, her attorney was getting the charges reduced to where she could actually get on with her life. Now, she had worked a job prior to her missing for over a year and was staying pretty clean and, trying to get away from the drug life. And then I'm not sure what happened, but whether it was his influence or what, he went to prison the day she went. I mean, he had a court appearance and they took him into custody the day she went missing. They both had court appearances, and not together, separately. And then that night's when she went missing.
Were these court appearances related to the same charges and they were as separate defendants, or were these two different instances that they were going to court for?
I think they were two separate instances.
So,
because I think Brian's involved a felon in possession of a weapon, and she didn't have that type of charge.
okay. And so Sarah goes to court the day that she goes missing. Yeah. And then Brian is in court and then is taken into custody or sentenced to prison time the day that she goes missing.
Yes.
Now I'm going to ask you a question, and if it's an opinion, I'd love to hear it. But do you think, because I'm asking your opinion, do you think or do you feel that Sarah's disappearance is related to him being put in jail, or do you find that coincidental that she goes missing? Was he worried that she might rat him out or turn state's evidence to get out from under what she was going through?
Well, okay. And I'm probably going to piss a lot of the family off, her parents in particular, but this is what I was told. That prior to their court dates, Brian had on several occasions made comment that if he ever went back to prison, she would pay the ultimate price. So that being said, if it's true, I feel like he could have possibly, for lack of another way to say it, ordered a hit on her, or the people that he was dealing for ordered the hit, if that's in fact what happened. See, we don't know. Right. We don't know.
So if we were to, and I try to tread lightly when it comes to speculating, but from hearing that, had she in the past made references that she was gonna to rat him out or I mean, that seems like a pretty direct quote, and he's directing it at her. So there would have to be a reason for that, wouldn't you think?
I would think, but there was a lot of rumor around town from the local gangs, the honkies, and a lot of hearsay that she had ratted him out to get out of charges. But I'm going to tell you something. Sarah was not a rat. She wouldn't have done it, because she knew the consequences if she did. And she had been approached by law enforcement to give up in certain individuals' names, and she never would. She absolutely refused. And this information was confirmed by my son, who knew her very well and used to run around with her, So it's not something I think she would have done, no.
So now that she goes missing, he goes to jail the same day. What happens next? Who's in the family dynamic? How long did it take for her to get reported missing? Who reports her missing? As best to your knowledge, how does that all play out? What's the time frame there?
Well, she was reported missing. Of an actual official report was on the 20th. She went missing on the 16th, the night of the 16th, around midnight, morning of the 17th. There had been a rumor that she had been spotted over in the northwest part of Joplin that came out like 3 weeks after she went missing, but I've never been able to confirm that with law enforcement that was factual. Anyway, she went missing. There was a young man that is the son of a friend of her mother's that had told his mother that Sarah was gone. And I think that was the 17th. And my son came to me the night of the 17th and said that he had heard that Sarah was gone and that we would never find her and she's dead. That's what my son told me. Now, how they knew, I'm not sure, and how this friend of Sarah's mother knew, but she had immediately went over to Sarah's mother's house, and I believe the friend that was with her that night was over there for several days before she was reported missing, and brought back a purse and her shoes. And the night that she went missing, she had bought a brand new pair of shoes, just an exact duplicate of what she had on. And the friend had said that she had changed shoes. So the old shoes was in the car, and they had got into some trouble and some mischief that evening. And they were going to get some stuff out of a van, and the van owner had called the police. So Sarah sent her friend on her way because she didn't really have a record or wasn't involved in any criminal activity, but the car description had been given. So anyway, when Sarah got out of the car, and this is, mind you, what I've been told, then one of the shoes fell out, and supposedly later on the police went back and found the other shoe. But the girl had returned Sarah's purse and shoe to her mother's house. And, Sarah wouldn't have thought anything about leaving her purse. She didn't, she carried one, but it wasn't critical to have on her. Her cell phone was the only thing, and her cell phone's never been found.
That was going to be my next question. So she had a cell phone on her at the time she went missing, but they found everything but her cell phone.
Yes.
Okay.
But she sent the girl packing, and then she took off walking to get away because she figured she could, ditch the police cars or whatever, and get away, and she could walk on home. And that's what the friend, the impression that she was going to do. Well, there was another friend of theirs that had joined her looking for her in the car for several hours that night, and Sarah wasn't around. They couldn't find her.
I want to go back just briefly to your son's comment that he had heard that she's gone and never going to find her. Did he ever elaborate on on who told him that, or was law enforcement notified about that,
Um,
to your knowledge?
no, I don't believe so, because my son had totally changed his life, and just I don't know whether he got it by text message, by phone call, or what, but it was serious enough. He told me to watch my back, and he took his family and he left the state. That's how scared he was.
So to him, this was a pretty serious thing
Oh,
going on, and
yes.
and how many days had passed when he found out this? Was it the next day? How long ago was it when he heard this and he took off and left?
It was the evening of the next day.
Okay, so almost right after.
Yes.
So who again was the family member that reported her missing?
Her mother.
Her mother.
Mm-hmm.
So what do the cops do? Are they at this point in time? She's missing. Brian's in prison. Are they? And
now,
ma'am,
Brian's out now.
Right. Well, we're just talking about at the time she disappeared.
Yeah.
What were the cops doing anything? Were they talking to her friends? Did they talk to Brian? What were they do, to your knowledge? What were they doing, and if anything?
Well, they were working with her parents, and they did some foot searches. We had a couple of the lead investigator, he had it in his mind, because he said this to me personally when we were on a search of the old family farm, because a tip had come in that she was right under our noses. And so I went out on the old family farm and looked around, and I found what looked like a makeshift grave. And I took photographs of what I found, sent it in, so they come back and set up and took cadaver dogs out there. Well, it ended up being a deer carcass that had been buried. Now, but the officer during that search had said, well, I think this is just a waste of time. He didn't even want to be there. His captain made him go, and that he thought that she just skipped out because of pending charges. And I told him, I said, well, that may be, but I doubt it.
So we've heard this type of thing before. If you've followed us since the very beginning, we have had a plethora of cases where you have law enforcement feels that this person's missing because they're running from something, or they're missing because they're adults, they can go missing. Here's my thing, folks. I understand from a law enforcement point of view that they think that people always run from their problems, that this is what Sarah did. But here's the thing too. Sarah had a lot of reasons for staying. She has children. And I think sometimes law enforcement needs to try to not look at things through cop eyes, but look at them through family eyes. And sometimes that's hard. Law enforcement's trained to think a certain way. And I think that that's what hurts these missing persons cases, is that, we don't, when we're talking about a missing persons case, we're seeing it through the loved one's eyes, the mom, the dad, the sister, the brother. We're looking at it through their eyes. Law enforcement, they don't see a gray area. They see black and white. They see what statistics show them. I think more training has to be done in this area, and that's the only way that these cases and these outcomes change, because in order to understand where a person's coming from, you have to kind of relate. And Sarah had had problems in the area of the criminal justice system. She had stuff that was going on, but not everyone's trying to get out from under and run. And my opinion on this is that this is just one of those things that can hurt a case. Let's go back to the interview.
And I just couldn't believe he said it to me. He had said some other things to Sarah's parents, and they've changed detectives and investigators on this case now. Over 3 years, they've changed it 3 times.
So let me ask your opinion. Do you believe that because of Sarah's history that they either feel were uninterested in looking for her, or they just chalked it up because of her history that this was something that they just didn't need to be involved in?
Well, I think both. Actually, my opinion. I think that they think, well, she's no longer a factor that we have to worry about, and they don't care to find her. I'm sorry. They come off to the public and the media like they are very concerned for her safety, etc. But I know just because my son had a past also, and they didn't give a hoot about him either. My oldest son had went missing 20 years ago, and I found him in Mexico City, Mexico. But did I get law enforcement assistance? Not at all. He was an adult. They told me he had a right to disappear.
How many times do you think someone's heard that, and not necessarily maybe in Sarah's case, but in others' cases? Terri just talked about her son being missing, and he can go missing. He's an adult. How much time goes by that is wasted, for not looking for someone? And I think that is so crucial, because what if some of these missing persons cases are not missing because they were kidnapped or taken into sex trafficking? What if they were murdered? And all that time's being wasted, time for evidence to get destroyed or lost, or leads that just shrivel up and go away. How much time is missing? Again, this is something that has to change within law enforcement, because all the time in the world it matters in these cases. And I firmly believe that changing this stigma of adults going missing, whether or not they're law-abiding citizens, whether or not they have an addiction problem, none of this should matter. Follow the case and look for keep an open mind. These are the things that are wrong with these cases. Okay. So 20 years ago, he was missing for 18 months, and you got no help. You found him. And now we're looking at this case, and do you feel like you see similarities that law enforcement is just not engaged because of maybe their moral beliefs that individuals like Sarah they don't deserve to be looked for, or they're just not worth the time?
Well, I do, and let me tell you a little bit more why. After Sarah went missing, and because I'm retired, I'm not in the best of health, and I take care of another disabled individual, elderly person. I started a missing persons group for Joplin, because when I went on the state website, which is where you can find out about the missing persons in the state of Missouri, and I've tracked this now for a long time, there's over 20 missing persons just out of Joplin. There's 14 regular missing adults and at least 6 children. And it's been consistent for over 3 years. Some of them have been missing since, the early 90s. And Joplin has just never really made an effort. They do periodically on Tracy Pickett, will do another search of a pond or something like that. They've never had any convictions on anybody that went missing. If they suspected, but they really haven't worked the cases, in my opinion, not like they could. And I knew that it took a while to get the FBI involved on Sarah's case, because Joplin PD had to ask them to come in to the case.
And so let's dive into that a little bit. Was that something that the family pushed for to get the FBI, and that's why Joplin allowed them to come in and assist on her case?
Yes, that, and it involves out of state, because they've got tips come in from Oklahoma that she was dumped down there, that, Kansas. It involved people from Kansas, as far as tip information. That's where Brian lives, is over in Kansas. And so it was a multi-state situation, and the family had to pressure.
One of the questions I get asked a lot by families is, how can I get the FBI involved? What do I need to do? The FBI can only be involved if the state and local agencies who are handling a missing persons case requests their assistance. Now, the only time that does not apply is if a case, for example, of trafficking, a person was abducted, they're missing, and they're citing different states. So if a person went missing from Florida, but they were spotted in Georgia, Mississippi, or in different states, the FBI gets involved then, because it then becomes a jurisdictional issue where they're moving from state to state. The other way they would get involved too, again, would be an abduction. If they knew right away this was an abduction, the FBI gets involved. So the painful thing is, for families that have a case that goes cold, and I hate that term, but when there's no movement on a case and families get frustrated, I wish I could get the FBI involved. The only way that happens is if the agency handling the investigation, local or state, asks the FBI's for assistance, the FBI assistance. And what we're hearing in Sarah's case is the family put a lot of heat and pressure on Joplin to get the FBI involved. This is like one of those things where it's case by case basis, and a lot of times the local authorities don't want to get the feds involved if they don't have to. And so that's why I encourage families all the time to stay on top of their missing persons cases, making sure that they're leading the charge of finding out. And if this is an option, then definitely families need to look into this and pressure local authorities to get help in looking for their loved one. Because at the end of the day, this is your loved one. And I understand that law enforcement has their way of dealing with things, but sometimes these are the things that we talk about that have to change. In this final part of the interview, we're going to talk about Brian Thorpe again. Brian Thorpe is the boyfriend, the significant other who has children with Sarah, and this tattoo that he got right after her disappearance. Take a listen. No way forward. I would be remiss to not bring this up. We're talking about Brian now. Brian was the boyfriend, Brian Thorpe. I want to talk about this tattoo because I just, again, personally find it odd and disturbing. And as we talk, we'll share the photographs of this tattoo. What do you make of the tattoo? It has a picture of what looks to be Sarah, being shushing someone with a clock. I mean, it's very detailed, and it's got a little mystery to it, if I'm being honest. What is your take on it?
Well, to my knowledge, Brian designed it and then went with the tattoo artist. And A lot of the symbols in them are gang related messages. It's almost, my impression is he's saying, well, I kept my word to the cartel. That's my impression. But the girl resembled in some very key features on the face, on the drawing, that only Sarah had.
The one thing in particular that I found disturbing about it was on the forearm of this tattoo, you have a woman, and again, this is just, if you look at her pictures, and we've shared a lot of pictures about Sarah on the podcast here, but I want to, the one in particular where it looks like she's asleep or she's closed her eyes kissing a skull, and underneath that it looks like an hourglass. That just struck me as very, it's bothersome, and I just wanted to get your opinion on that.
To me, the hourglass meant, your time's up, and that was the kiss of death.
The tattoo has always been a problem for me, and we've had this case and have been looking into it for a month or so. And if you go back to, I want to point something out to you. Now, it's been said, according to sources, Brian said that, this is just a face. It's not actually Sarah, but I want to point a couple of things out to you. If we can go, and this is a teenage picture of Sarah, and you see her eyebrows. They don't have a high arch on them. Now, Sarah had an issue with the right eyebrow, and there was a scar. So she had to arch her eyebrows. And the right one was always more arched than the other one was. And when we take a look at the tattoo, if you look at her right eyebrow, that has a high arch, as opposed to the left one. I'm very familiar with tattoos. I have quite a few, and this picture that you're looking at right now looks like it had been taken from a photo. And a couple of things here are striking is the shape of Sarah's nose, and then the eyebrow, of course. And then if you look very closely, the hands don't look like normal hands. They look like skeleton hands, and she's shushing, or she's, like making the symbol to be quiet. And the other things, again, that are striking on this tattoo is the one in the middle. She looks like she's kissing a skull. And if you look very closely at the middle one, where you'll see the red line that's been drawn, there's a time there. You have what appears to be the hour hand on the very top, and the minute hand at the very bottom. It's pointing at a specific time. This tattoo is remarkable in the sense that it looks like it's telling a story. On the tattoo picture on the right side of the forearm, the smaller one, where you see the compass, and there you see the N at the very bottom, like it's north. Like, this is a very detailed tattoo, and this is something that I found that struck me, because, again, Sarah is missing. We don't know her status, if she's alive or not, but I just found it striking that her boyfriend would get a tattoo like this. And here's Terry's take on this tattoo and her thoughts about it.
Why would anybody put a grid like an old-fashioned map and a compass on directional and if you look on that tattoo, it's all on there, unless he knows where her remains are.
And that's what I wanted to ask you as we wrap up. I wanted to ask you. So we've got a Missy. She's a beautiful woman. She's a mother. She was making some mistakes. She was trying to rectify those, and she's missing. Does anybody have a group of suspects, or what are your thoughts? Do you think that Brian may know something or may have something to do with it, or do you believe that it's somebody outside of that circle?
I think what might have happened to Sarah, her friends and Brian included, know. I think they know. They just won't tell. And law enforcement's not putting any pressure on them to tell. I think that tattoo, had been long enough to where he was in and Brian was memorializing her. But I think that he was also sending a message, because he's now involved in raising their sons, so, and he's got a job and all this, but I think he's letting them know that he kept his promise. I don't know if law enforcement has any real suspects, but I think it's worth checking into. I am not comfortable with saying Brian's in the all clear. I'm not comfortable with saying her two male friends that she run around with, one or the other all the time. But, when Brian was before, when he was incarcerated or whatever, the ones that were involved in her life were, well, I can't clear any of them. It's not, I don't know enough about the evidence that's come in, but a lot of it has pointed to these key people. And I don't understand why law enforcement hasn't really put the pressure on them.
The grim truth about the case of Sarah Burton is Terri really doesn't know what happened to Sarah. She definitely wants the answers, and who can blame her? I understand. Every family that I've dealt with, the 30 plus families that we've covered on the podcast or the weekly Remind episodes or Grimm Media News, wants answers. And sometimes those answers are either not there, or details of that can't be known because of the integrity of the investigation must be maintained. I think in Terri's case, she doesn't want the case to fall through the cracks and fall by the wayside. There has been a lot of contention when it relates to this case and the parties involved, people that have worked the case and the family. This is not an easy thing. There's no playbook on how to handle a missing persons case. And as a journalist and as an advocate myself, I think that at the end of the day, we all need to work together and try to take our emotions and put them aside for the common cause of finding Sarah Burton. And my message today is that has to be the end result. Again, this isn't easy, and I feel for Terri and her family. And a lot of this not knowing can eat you up. And there are families out there right now that don't get any sleep because they don't know what's happening. They don't know where their missing persons case is going to find itself, or if they're ever going to find their loved one. And I think that's what's going on in this case. I don't know if Brian Thorpe had anything to do with the disappearance of Sarah. I will tell you that these tattoos are a are telling. They're telling a story. There's a message in here, and I hope that this is something being looked into. Again, I don't know a lot of information. This case is there's a tight lid on information, and whatever the reason for it, I hope that the ends justify the means, and we can find out what happened to Sarah Burton, and if there are people responsible for her disappearance, that they see the inside of a courtroom. Sarah Burton went missing from Joplin, Missouri on July 16th, 2018. She's 5'7", 170 pounds, with brown hair and blue eyes. She does have a scar on her right eyebrow. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Sarah Burton, please contact the Joplin Police Department at 417-623-3131. Again, that's 417-623-3131. I would like to thank Terri Burton for speaking with me about her granddaughter's case. These are things that are never easy, and I appreciate her trust in us to tell the story and bring it to others, in the hopes that not only can people share this, in the hopes that this could bring information to find Sarah, but also to other families and how they can come together and relate, because they belong in this sad fraternity that is the missing. Next week, join us again for another episode of the Grimm Truth Podcast here on the Grimm Truth Podcast YouTube channel. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the Grimm Truth Podcast YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Like and comment. Share the podcast. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think about this case. What are your thoughts? Comments. We would love to interact with you guys and start a discussion about this. These cases are very important, and they need resolution. These people need to be found, and the family needs the answers. And maybe somebody out there can give those answers to the family. That's going to do it for this episode of the Grimm Truth Podcast. As always, we are going to continue to be a voice for the voiceless in search of the truth. I'm Steve Stone, and this is the Grimm Truth Podcast.